Every recorded collapse reaches the same moment of clarity. It is the instant when paper currency still exists, but nobody reaches for it anymore. In Sarajevo during the 90s, money burned faster than firewood. In Argentina's financial implosion, shop shelves emptied while wallets stayed full. In Venezuela, wages rose weekly while hunger rose daily. History is consistent on one point. When systems fracture, value does not vanish. It mutates. And those who fail to track that mutation do not merely lose comfort, they lose position. Barter does not emerge because people become primitive. It emerges because centralized trust dies. When enforcement fails and supply chains rot, value collapses inward toward the body. Calories, warmth, pain relief, access, silence. These are not preferences, they are survival constants. In that environment, negotiation becomes irrelevant. Exchange becomes submission mathematics. People do not trade to profit. They trade to stop a problem from becoming fatal. The mistake most people make is assuming scarcity creates value. Scarcity only creates panic. Value is created by predictability under stress. An item that disappears every day becomes more powerful than one that lasts forever. An object that solves a recurring problem outranks anything symbolic. Gold fails not because it is worthless, but because it does nothing. When hunger, infection, cold, and fear operate on a 12-hour clock. This list is not about wealth. It is about leverage. The items discussed are not glamorous, not heroic, and not morally comfortable. They are tools that sit at the intersection of need and inevitability. People will not admire you for having them. They will beg you. And once begging begins, the power balance is already decided. Stop. The first category that dominates any collapse is not weapons, not gold, and not technology. It is consumables with a short, unforgiving depletion cycle. Items people use every single day without thinking, until the day they are gone. When collapse begins, most individuals still behave as if resupply will return. They ration poorly, share emotionally, and assume tomorrow will look like yesterday. That assumption creates the first wave of desperation, and desperation defines barter value. Consumables win because they convert time into pressure. Food is obvious, but bulk food fails as a barter tool because it exposes you. The mistake is believing volume equals power. In reality, volume paints a target. The highest leverage items are small, divisible, and consumed invisibly. Items that can disappear into a pocket and vanish into a body within minutes. Salt, sugar, caffeine, nicotine, basic seasonings. Not because they are luxuries, but because withdrawal, blandness, and fatigue degrade decision-making faster than hunger alone. People underestimate how fast morale collapses when daily rituals break. The morning stimulant, the familiar taste, the psychological signal that life is still structured. When these disappear, panic accelerates. That panic does not wait for starvation. It begins within days. And panic makes people irrational traders. They will exchange tomorrow's calories for today's relief. That is where leverage is born. Another critical mistake is assuming everyone needs the same amount. In reality, high-stress environments increase consumption rates. People burn more calories, sleep less, and self-medicate more. What once lasted a week now lasts 2 days. This compresses time. Compression creates urgency. Urgency destroys bargaining power. If you control consumables with predictable daily demand, you are not negotiating. You are setting terms. Visibility is the silent killer here. The person who trades openly, generously, and frequently becomes mapped. Collapse economies do not forgive reputation mistakes. Being known as the guy with food is a death sentence. The correct posture is controlled scarcity. You never trade from abundance, you trade from apparent limitation. Every exchange must look costly to you. This preserves your perceived vulnerability while extracting maximum value. The real power of consumables is not the item itself, but the repeat transaction. Tools can be traded once. Information can be traded once. Consumables create dependency loops. A person who trades with you today will need you again tomorrow. That transforms barter into influence. Influence becomes protection, intelligence, and labor. This is how small items build asymmetric power structures. There is also a timing window. Early collapse rewards consumables massively. Later, as people adapt, substitution appears. Gardens, scavenging routes, crude production. This does not kill value, but it shifts it. Those who understand timing rotate stock before visibility increases. Those who cling to hoards become static nodes, and static nodes get stripped. The core principle is simple and brutal. Anything the human body demands daily becomes a bargaining weapon when supply is interrupted. Anything that eases stress without solving long-term survival creates addiction-like behavior under collapse conditions. You are not trading items. You are trading relief. And relief, when scarce, overrides logic, loyalty, and long-term planning. This is why the first people to gain leverage after a collapse are rarely the strongest or the smartest. They are the ones who understood consumption curves before panic made them obvious. After consumables establish the first layer of leverage, the second layer emerges immediately behind it. Tools that convert human effort into usable output. In every collapse, calories alone are not enough. People can eat and still fail. What determines survival next is efficiency. The ability to turn limited strength, limited daylight, and limited safety windows into results. This is where production tools dominate barter, not because they are rare, but because they multiply survival probability. Most people misunderstand tool value because they evaluate it in peacetime logic. They ask whether a tool is expensive, modern, or well-made. Collapse erases those metrics. The only question that matters is whether the tool reduces time, noise, or exposure. A crude hand tool that allows someone to harvest, cut, repair, or defend faster becomes more valuable than complex equipment that requires maintenance, fuel, or expertise. The real power of these tools is not in ownership, but in control. Lending a tool under supervision often generates more leverage than trading it outright. This preserves your asset while extracting labor, loyalty, or future obligation. In collapse conditions, dependency on process is stronger than dependency on objects. If someone needs your tool to function, you do not need to dominate them physically. You dominate them structurally. Another common mistake is assuming weapons sit at the top of this category. They do not. Weapons escalate risk. Production tools reduce it. Axes, saws, digging implements, repair tools, simple mechanical devices. These allow people to produce shelter, fuel, water access, and basic infrastructure. Anyone who controls these controls the pace of group survival. And pace determines who falls behind when conditions tighten. There is also a hierarchy inside tools that most overlook. Tools that create calories outrank tools that create comfort. Tools that reduce injury outrank tools that increase output. A person with a broken hand is out of the economy entirely. Anything that prevents injury, blisters, infections, or exhaustion quietly outperforms flashy gear. This is why gloves, wraps, basic protective equipment, and simple maintenance items spike in value once people start working physically every day. Timing again matters. Early collapse sees panic-driven trades for consumables. As that stabilizes, production becomes the focus. Groups that fail to transition from consumption to production collapse internally. They fight over shrinking piles instead of expanding capability. If you control the tools that enable production, you become essential during this transition. Essential actors are tolerated even when resources are scarce. However, visibility remains lethal. A person openly known to possess critical tools becomes a bottleneck, and bottlenecks attract force. The correct strategy is fragmentation. Never hold all related tools in one place. Never reveal full capability. Let people believe you have access, not stockpiles. Access can be negotiated. Stockpiles are seized. The deeper principle is this. In a world without systems, labor becomes the most abundant resource, and efficiency becomes the most scarce. Anything that increases the return on human effort gains immediate barter power. You are not trading metal or wood. You are trading time, safety, and energy conservation. And in collapse mathematics, those variables decide who survives long enough to matter. The third category crosses a line most people refuse to acknowledge until it is too late. Medical and hygiene items do not behave like normal barter goods. They bypass ideology, loyalty, and morality. When pain, infection, or bodily failure enters the equation, negotiation collapses into submission logic. People do not weigh options when blood, fever, or decay are present. They comply. In stable societies, medicine is abstract. It is regulated, delayed, and buffered by institutions. In collapse, medicine becomes immediate and personal. A cut that would once earn a bandage becomes a death clock. A tooth infection turns into weeks of delirium. A simple fever isolates a person from labor, defense, and food acquisition. The body stops being resilient when nutrition, sleep, and sanitation degrade simultaneously. This is why basic medical items spike in value faster than advanced ones. Antibiotics matter, but so do antiseptics, painkillers, wound dressings, antifungal treatments, anti-diarrheal agents, and hydration aids. Items that prevent a problem from escalating are often more valuable than those that treat advanced failure. Collapse punishes delay brutally. Anything that buys time buys survival. Hygiene follows the same logic, but with a slower fuse. People underestimate how quickly sanitation collapse creates cascading failure. Skin infections spread. Foot rot immobilizes. Parasites drain energy. Diarrhea kills faster than hunger when clean water is uncertain. Soap, disinfectants, basic cleaning agents, feminine hygiene products, and oral care items become leverage not because they are comfortable, but because they prevent silent collapse inside the body. The critical mistake is thinking these items will be shared altruistically. Early on they might be. Later they will not. When supply dries up, medicine becomes triage currency. People will trade disproportionate value to stop pain or avoid perceived death. This is not cruelty, it is biology. The survival brain overrides social conditioning under threat. There is also an asymmetry advantage here. Medical items are lightweight, compact, and often have extreme value-to-weight ratios. A handful of tablets can outweigh sacks of food in barter power under the right conditions. This makes them ideal for mobility and concealment. However, the risk is equally high. Being known as a medical source attracts desperate individuals, not rational traders. Desperation erodes boundaries. The correct posture is controlled access, never open supply. Treatment as a service generates more leverage than handing over items. Observation, dosing, and limited assistance preserve scarcity while creating dependency. This also protects you from misuse and backlash. In collapse conditions, when medicine fails, blame follows. Distance matters. Another overlooked factor is credibility. Medical barter only works if people believe it will help. Packaging, confidence, and restraint matter. Overpromising destroys leverage permanently. A single failed expectation can flip gratitude into hostility. Silence and precision outperform generosity. The underlying principle is ruthless but consistent. In a collapsed system, health equals participation. Anyone who cannot move, work, or think clearly is already half dead. Items that preserve bodily function under degrading conditions do not just trade well. They command obedience. And obedience, once established, reshapes every interaction that follows. When infrastructure dies, darkness returns faster than people expect. Not metaphorical darkness, but literal absence of light, heat, and controlled ignition. This is the moment when energy-adjacent items spike violently in value. Fire, light, and warmth are not comforts in collapse. They are permission to function after sunset, to cook safely, to stay dry, to signal, to deter, and to survive cold without burning calories at an unsustainable rate. The mistake most people make is assuming energy means electricity. Electricity is fragile, centralized, and maintenance-heavy. Collapse strips it first. What replaces it is primitive, portable, and brutally simple: flame, spark, stored heat. These are technologies older than civilization, and they reassert dominance immediately. People who cannot create fire on demand become dependent within days. People who can control it dictate terms. Ignition tools dominate this category. Lighters, matches, ferro rods, accelerants. Not because they are rare, but because failure is catastrophic. One failed attempt to start a fire in rain, wind, or cold shifts behavior from confidence to panic instantly. Redundancy becomes obsession. People will overtrade for backup ignition because the downside of failure is hypothermia, starvation, or exposure. This is not theoretical. It is primal. Light follows closely behind. Darkness compresses time and increases fear. It limits movement, productivity, and defense. A reliable light source extends operational hours and reduces psychological stress. This makes it disproportionately valuable, especially in urban ruins or enclosed environments. The irony is that light also creates risk. Visible light attracts attention. This creates a paradox. People desperately want light, but fear being seen. Items that offer controlled, low-signature illumination command higher value than those that flood an area. Heat is the slow killer people underestimate. Cold drains calories, degrades sleep, and accelerates illness. Improvised insulation helps, but without heat generation, winter becomes an execution clock. Items that allow safe indoor heating, efficient fuel use, or heat retention become strategic assets. People will trade long-term survival resources to survive the next cold night. Collapse compresses planning horizons brutally. The barter power here is amplified by ignorance. Many people know fire is important. Few know how to manage it safely without modern infrastructure. This creates dependency not just on tools, but on competence. Knowledge paired with ignition multiplies leverage. Knowledge without tools does not. Tools without knowledge fail under stress. The combination is what people beg for. Visibility remains the threat vector. Fire advertises presence. Smoke signals location. Heat leaves traces. Anyone trading openly in energy tools must control narrative and exposure. You are not a supplier. You are a limiter. You never appear as the only source. You appear as one of several uncertain options. The deeper principle is that energy is agency. Without it, humans revert to daylight-only, calorie-bleeding survival. With it, they regain structure, routine, and perceived control. People will not trade rationally for energy. They will trade emotionally, urgently, and repeatedly. And repeated trades create dependence. In collapse conditions, dependence is power that does not require force. Once basic survival stabilizes, the barter economy mutates again. The next layer is not physical sustenance, but orientation. Information and access become trade goods, not as abstract knowledge, but as permission to move, avoid, and survive without friction. In collapse conditions, ignorance is more dangerous than hunger. A well-fed person who walks into the wrong street, the wrong group, or the wrong timing window does not stay alive long enough to matter. The critical distinction here is that information is only valuable when it is actionable and current. Old knowledge decays rapidly. Routes change. Threats migrate. Safe zones rot. Anyone trading stale information destroys credibility instantly. This is why reliable information sources become rare and powerful. Not because they know more, but because they update faster and speak less. Access functions the same way. Access is not ownership. It is the ability to pass without resistance. Safe passage, temporary shelter, clean water points, blind spots, and timing windows. These are not things you carry. They are things you unlock, and unlocking them for someone else carries immense barter value because it reduces exposure. Exposure is the most lethal variable in collapse environments. People often assume information should be shared freely. This is a peacetime instinct that gets people killed. In collapse, information shared without control becomes a weapon turned against you. Routes become crowded. Safe places become targets. Advantage evaporates. The correct approach is selective disclosure. You never give full maps. You give fragments, enough to solve today's problem, not tomorrow's. Another mistake is believing information trades equally. It does not. Information that helps someone avoid danger is worth more than information that helps them gain something. Survival prioritizes loss avoidance over gain. A warning about an ambush zone is more valuable than directions to a food cache. Fear sharpens attention. Relief creates loyalty. Information also compounds when paired with reputation. If people believe your warnings save lives, your words become currency. This is power that weighs nothing and cannot be confiscated, but it is fragile. One false claim, one exaggeration, and it collapses. In environments where lies get people killed, credibility is unforgiving. There is a darker edge to this category. Controlling access can slide into coercion. Gatekeepers emerge. Those who control bridges, corridors, or choke points convert information into tolls. This is not theoretical. It appears in every collapse scenario. The danger is becoming visible. Visible gatekeepers attract challengers. Smart operators rotate, relocate, and never become permanent fixtures. The underlying principle is that movement equals survival. Anyone who can move safely, quietly, and predictably outlives those who cannot. Information and access reduce randomness. Randomness kills. When you trade these assets, you are not selling knowledge. You are selling reduced probability of death. And people will pay irrational prices to lower that probability even temporarily. After the initial phases of collapse, when hunger is managed, tools are circulating, and movement is possible, a quieter barter category rises. It is often dismissed as secondary by those who think survival is only physical. That dismissal is fatal. Items that restore routine, dignity, and psychological stability begin to command disproportionate value, not because they keep the body alive, but because they keep groups functional. Collapse does not just destroy infrastructure, it erodes identity. When people lose routine, privacy, and personal control, decision-making degrades. Conflict rises. Cooperation collapses. Groups fracture from the inside long before external threats finish them. This is why items that reintroduce normalcy become strategic assets rather than comforts. Clothing repair materials, basic grooming items, simple entertainment, writing tools, familiar smells, and small personal effects begin to circulate with surprising power. Not openly at first, quietly, between individuals who realize that mental degradation is now the primary threat. A person who cannot sleep, cannot focus, and cannot maintain a sense of self becomes unreliable. Unreliable people get excluded or eliminated. The mistake is assuming morale is emotional. It is not. Morale is operational stability. A group with stable morale plans better, works longer, and fights less internally. Anything that preserves that stability indirectly preserves calories, reduces injury, and increases output. This makes morale-related items force multipliers, not luxuries. Another error is assuming these items trade evenly. They do not. Their value spikes after basic needs are met, but before long-term security is established. This creates a narrow window where people will overtrade for relief from psychological strain. Once routines re-solidify, value normalizes. Timing again separates leverage from liability. There is also a status component. Certain items signal competence, preparedness, or leadership. These signals matter when formal hierarchies dissolve. People follow those who appear stable. Items that help maintain appearance, organization, or calm project authority without force. Authority without force is the most efficient control mechanism in collapse conditions. However, this category carries risk. Providing too much comfort too widely creates dependency and resentment. People begin to associate you with relief, then blame you when relief cannot be maintained. The correct approach is scarcity and selectivity. These items are not traded openly. They are used to stabilize key individuals, not entire groups. The deeper principle is that collapse survival is not a sprint or a siege. It is an endurance test under degrading conditions. Physical resources keep you alive short-term. Psychological stability keeps you alive long-term. Items that protect the mind indirectly protect the body. And when people realize their internal collapse is approaching faster than their physical one, they will trade aggressively to slow it down, even if only for a while. When the collapse economy matures past raw survival and fragile stabilization, a counterintuitive shift occurs. Certain non-essential items begin to rise in value, not because they are needed to live, but because they reward those who have already survived. This is where compact, portable, luxury-adjacent goods enter the barter field. Most people misjudge this phase and either trade too early or hold too long. Both mistakes are punished. These items are not necessities. They are incentives. Alcohol, stimulants beyond basic caffeine, tobacco products, small indulgences, and sensory comforts begin to function as social lubricants and control mechanisms. They smooth negotiations, reward cooperation, and temporarily suppress the psychological weight of collapse. In a world stripped of pleasure, controlled pleasure becomes power. The mistake is thinking these goods behave like consumables. They do not. Their value is volatile and highly contextual. Early collapse makes them dangerous to hold. Desperation turns indulgence into a trigger for violence. Later collapse transforms them into prestige currency. People who have secured food, safety, and routine begin to crave differentiation. This is when these items explode in value among survivors, who now compete for status, loyalty, and influence rather than calories. Another misunderstanding is assuming these items are frivolous. They are not. They regulate behavior. A reward offered at the right time can secure labor, silence, or allegiance more effectively than threat. Humans do not run purely on fear. They run on relief cycles. Those who control relief control tempo. However, these items are visibility traps. Being known as a source of indulgence attracts not just traders, but predators. The correct strategy is controlled circulation. These items are never stockpiled openly. They appear episodically, as rewards or incentives, not commodities. Their scarcity must feel intentional, not accidental. There is also a substitution risk. Unlike food or medicine, indulgences can often be replaced. Homemade alcohol, improvised stimulants, or substitutes emerge quickly. This erodes long-term value. The window is sharp and narrow. Those who understand timing extract maximum leverage. Those who misread it end up holding liabilities. The deeper principle is that once survival stabilizes, humans revert to social competition. Hierarchies reform. Identity returns. And with identity comes desire. Items that feed desire without threatening survival become tools of influence. Influence outperforms force in late-stage collapse because force destabilizes systems that survivors are trying to rebuild. This is the phase where many early survivors lose advantage. They mistake endurance for dominance. They stop adapting. The barter economy never stops evolving. And the moment you treat any item as permanently valuable, you have already fallen behind. By this stage of collapse, the most dangerous mistake is not ignorance, it is visibility. Certain items retain enormous barter value, but become increasingly hazardous to trade openly. The economy does not disappear. It goes dark. Exchanges move away from markets, away from crowds, and away from anyone who cannot be trusted to stay silent. At this point, what you trade matters less than how you are perceived. High-value items create gravitational pull. The more consistently you supply something critical, the more people map you. Mapping leads to patterns. Patterns invite force. Collapse does not reward fairness, it rewards opacity. Anyone who becomes a known node in the barter network accumulates attention, and attention becomes pressure. Pressure becomes violence. The illusion of safety often comes from group size. People believe being embedded in a group protects them. In reality, groups leak information constantly. Gossip replaces currency. Reputation spreads faster than goods. The moment others believe you have reserves rather than access, your life expectancy shortens. This is why experienced operators avoid becoming associated with a single item or role. Another error is moral signaling. Public generosity feels safe early on. Later, it brands you as a resource, not a person. Once you are categorized as a resource, consent erodes. People rationalize taking from you as necessity. Collapse logic does not permit long-term altruism without enforcement. This phase also introduces counterfeit risk. As demand rises and supply tightens, imitation floods the system. Fake medicine, diluted alcohol, inert tools, and false information appear. Trust collapses further. Transactions require verification, intermediaries, or proof of effect. This increases friction but also increases the value of established credibility. Credibility becomes one of the few assets that scales without material stock. The correct response is rotation and misdirection. You never trade the same category repeatedly in the same area. You shift roles. You allow others to appear more central than you. You cultivate deniability. The safest position is never being the best option, only a possible one. There is also a psychological shift. People begin to resent those who appear to benefit from collapse. Success attracts moral outrage. Envy becomes justification. This is when ideological violence emerges. People convince themselves that taking from you is restoring balance. Visibility feeds that narrative. The underlying principle is simple and unforgiving. In late-stage collapse, survival depends less on what you possess and more on how little others can prove you possess. The most valuable barter items are those no one can trace back to you consistently. Silence becomes currency. Anonymity becomes armor. And those who fail to adapt to this reality do not lose their goods first. They lose their position. At the end of the barter cycle, there is no list anymore. There is only structure. People who survive long enough to understand this stop thinking in terms of items and start thinking in terms of flow. What moves, when it moves, who touches it, and who never sees it at all. Barter stops being exchange and becomes systems control. The final mistake is hoarding. Hoards signal permanence. Permanence attracts correction. Collapse environments punish anything static. The correct model is rotation. Nothing stays in your possession long enough to define you. Goods pass through, convert, fragment, and disappear. You do not accumulate. You circulate. Circulation hides volume and confuses intent. Control of flow means never being dependent on a single category. Consumables dry up, tools break, medicine expires, information decays. The survivor who lives by one pillar collapses when that pillar fails. The survivor who understands substitution and timing always has leverage, even when specific items vanish. Flexibility outperforms stock. Another critical principle is asymmetry. You never trade equal value. You trade mismatched urgency. You wait until the other side is under pressure. You are not. Time advantage is everything. The person who can walk away sets the price. The moment you need the trade, you have already lost leverage. This is why mobility, redundancy, and patience matter more than inventory size. You also stop thinking locally. Local dominance is visible. Visibility is lethal. You operate across edges, not centers. You move between groups, never fully embedded. Embedded actors inherit group enemies, group scarcity, and group collapse cycles. Peripheral actors extract value without absorbing blame. Trust at this stage is functional, not emotional. You do not trust people. You trust patterns. Repeated behavior under stress is the only currency of reliability. Anyone who demands belief instead of demonstrating consistency is a liability. Anyone who overshares is signaling instability. The final realization is this: barter is not about survival items. It is about power distribution in a resource-dead environment. Those who understand this early survive quietly. Those who learn it late survive loudly, briefly, and violently. There is no winning the barter economy. There is only avoiding becoming its centerpiece. When people stop asking what you have and start asking where you are, your window is closing. Silence, movement, and timing are the last currencies that never collapse. Everything else is temporary.